With 35 years and counting of genre-defining music under their belt, the Metallica quartet of James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, Kirk Hammett and Robert Trujillo are undoubtedly intelligent and incredibly skilled individuals. Their music isn't just memorable because it helped spearhead the thrash genre and then hard rock in the mainstream, but through all sorts of references, tidbits and callbacks peppered throughout their songs. So in celebration of details even the most hardcore fans overlook, let's dig deep and make Metallica's music even better than what you already thought. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are 9 hidden details you never noticed in Metallica's songs. Number 9. Bass Solo, Take 1. The 4 infamous words that begin one of the best bass performances in the history of music, Cliff Burton's calm declaration of Bass Solo, Take 1. What to the uninitiated may just be 4 minutes of the late great Cliff Burton showing off with his monstrous 4 strings is actually the soundtrack to one of the most important moments in metal history. The basic layout and structure of the bass solo that would later be called Anesthesia Pulling Teeth is something that had been with Burton for a while prior to joining Metallica in 1982. It's the riff that he was laying out on stage with his original band Trauma when he was spotted by Lars Ulrich and James Hetfield, who were both naturally stunned by what they saw. The bass solo Take 1 statement on Kill 'Em All is intentionally left in to cement the fact that Burton could indeed perform such a technical, intricate, and when compared to his contemporaries, long bass solo entirely in one go, with no stops or faults. It was a subtle but effective way to hammer home his true genius. R.I.P. Cliff Burton. Number 8. No Kirk Hammett on Nothing Else Matters. Outside of Anesthesia Pulling Teeth, Nothing Else Matters is the only Metallica song that can be found on a full studio album without the involvement of longtime shredder Kirk Hammett. Instead, James Hetfield is both rhythm and lead guitarist in the version that made it onto the Black Album, despite Hammett fulfilling the latter role for the song in every live performance since. The reason why Hammett doesn't play is actually pretty simple, and no, it wasn't because he lost all of his notes for guitar solos this time. Initially, James Hetfield wrote Nothing Else Matters as a love letter to his then-girlfriend. The iconic beginning, which consists of plucking the open strings of an E minor chord, were even thought of by Hetfield when he was on the phone with her, hence the one-handed simplicity. Hetfield initially wanted to keep the song personal and leave it off the Black Album. It wasn't until Lars Ulrich managed to convince him late in the recording process that Nothing Else Matters finally made it onto tape. However, due to the quick schedule the song had as a result, Hetfield didn't have the time to teach Hammett how to play it in the studio, and thus the entire track was recorded with just James doing lead and rhythm. Number 7. The meaning behind Murder 1. With its countless references to Iron Horses and Aces High, Murder 1 is clearly a tribute to the legendary Lemmy, but what about that title? Well, check out the song's video and you'll see the title emblazoned on Lemmy's amplifiers. This is because Murder 1 was written in gold in one of Lemmy's real-world favorite amps, and he brought it on tour with Motorhead from 1976 until it got blown up around 2007/2008. A far more obscure reference, but definitely one worth mentioning, and it proves that Metallica really did love Motorhead that damn much. Number 6. Master of Puppets has an additional layer to its stories, words, and riffs. Master of Puppets is a true masterpiece, and regularly cited as the best metal album of all time. However, one example of its sheer musical brilliance that a few seem to bring up is the ingenious way the record matches its lyrical themes with the music itself. For example, Welcome Home Sanitarium is a track that tackles the concept of insanity and being trapped in a mental institution head-on, in a manner inspired by the book One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. However, the very way that its music builds and varies, unpredictably switching from clean to heavy and then full-on oral madness, matches the frantic, incalculable nature of an insane mind. Disposable Heroes 2, with its firmly anti-war lyrics, contains pummeling percussion that, at alternate points, resembles either the pounding of war drums or the relentless, noisy chatter of machine gun fire. Battery, which tackles assault and battery, relates the danger and suddenness of the emotion of anger by beginning with a tranquil acoustic passage before descending into one of the album's most intense guitar riffs. Also, the Cthulhu-oriented The Thing That Should Not Be possesses slow, sluggish, heavy riffs that mimic the feel of an immense beast dragging itself through the crushing depths of the sea. It is all of these cues and this mastery of tone and aura that elevates Master of Puppets above even the other Metallica albums, and is one of the many reasons as to why the album remains a metal classic. Number 5. Every single thing about The Memory Remains. That whole load-reload period was a bit weird, but speaking of Reload, its first single, The Memory Remains, dropped in mid-November 1997, just 1 week before the record hit shelves. Although the whole Reload period was one hell of a Hawaiian shirt cigar-chomping deviation as to what we all expected, the single The Memory Remains dropped in 1997 and has remained fairly playable and likable to this day. Existing as a song that tackles topics like declining fame and becoming a jaded, washed-up ex-celebrity, this is territory rife with cultural references, so much so that one day it might end up getting its own list. Primarily and more apparently is the inclusion of Marianne Faithfull on backing vocals. As a singer who had her commercial peak in the 60s and 70s, as well as huge pop cultural relevance being that she was dating Mick Jagger during that period, she was a perfect fit for the track's subject matter and possessed a dark, eerie, haunting tone that perfectly punctuates the regretful tones of the song. This topic of remaining lost in prior success may or may not also be why James Hetfield references by name his own band's beloved 1984 cut Fade to Black during the song's bridge. Marianne Faithfull also lets out a slightly obscure spoken word segment during her own unsettling hummed outro, which twice states, "say yes or at least say hello." This is a Marilyn Monroe quote from the film The Misfits from 1961, made wholly appropriate by the fact that the movie was Monroe's last ever on-screen role before her tragic suicide. And as one final cool touch regarding this song, have you ever wondered how the band achieved the effect in the music video of swinging round and round a square room without falling off their platform? The effect was actually done by keeping their platform perfectly still, and then attaching cameras to the outside walls, which were circling around the band while they stood in place. I don't know about you, but this music video kinda blew my mind when I was still a teenager. Number 4. Cliff Burton's contributions to And Justice for All. 1988's And Justice for All was the first album to drop after the saddening death of Metallica's genius bassist, Cliff Burton. When the album came out with Jason Newsted now manning the low end, a lot of fans were somewhat surprised that the record did not contain more overt references to Burton, who was sorely missed. However, a somber and very heartfelt tribute to him can be found in the form of instrumental To Live Is to Die. Just over 10 minutes long and packed with tear-jerking riffs and solos, the track's bassline is a medley of riffs and sections that Cliff had written before his death that were never able to be used on any other recording. Despite being an instrumental, the song also has a spoken word section. When a man lies, he murders some part of the world. These are the pale deaths which men miscall their lives. All this I cannot bear to witness any longer, cannot the kingdom of salvation take me home. Cliff Burton actually receives a writing credit for this in And Justice for All's liner notes, although the first two lines were originally written by poet Paul Gerhardt from the 17th century. Cannot the kingdom of salvation take me home can also be found on Cliff Burton's memorial headstone at the site of his death near Ljungby in Sweden. Although it doesn't mention Burton by name, another brilliant piece of music dedicated to the late bassist is Megadeth's In My Darkest Hour, the lyrics of which frontman and ex-Metallica guitarist Dave Mustaine wrote about in one session after learning about the untimely passing of his ex-bandmate. Number 3. That horn at the start of The Unforgiven. Many fans and critics have talked about how The Unforgiven's horn has become a hallmark of the track's legacy in both live settings and beyond, but what does it actually mean and why is it there? Well, turns out some listeners might have recognized the signature sound from somewhere else. The horn is actually stolen directly from 1960 western The Unforgiven, best known for starring decorated World War II hero turned famed actor Audie Murphy alongside then future star Audrey Hepburn. However, not only was the sound lifted from the film, but it was reversed to mask the theft and most likely to avoid attracting the ire of all sorts of United Artists copyright lawyers. While the film and the track itself seem to have very little in common, with the track being about a persecuted individual and his struggles with bitterness, isolation, and regret, the opening acoustic passage has a vibe very reminiscent of classic American Western movies. Furthermore, the horn gives the song a more out-of-left-field beginning, instantly setting The Unforgiven apart from the other entries on the Black Album. Number 2. That horn is still there at the start of The Unforgiven III. Continuing with the Unforgiven saga, Death Magnetic's The Unforgiven III is probably the weakest entry in the entire trilogy, and a large reason for several fans deriding it as it refuses to stick to the structure of the other two tracks in the lineage. One of the biggest complaints? That the horn is missing, and instead we got a piano riff opening up the track. However, whilst fans are correct in that this isn't the reversed horn from the Unforgiven movie as it is with the other two songs, there is actually a horn present in the Unforgiven 3, buried deep beneath that piano at the very start. To be fair, in a way, this is more ingenious than anybody has given it credit for, as the first Unforgiven actually does utilize a keyboard as it opens up, lost underneath the percussion and acoustic guitars. The Unforgiven 3 then reverses that dynamic by bringing the keys to the very front and the horn to the very back. Does this all make it much closer to being a true Unforgiven song? Well, it's still lacking the what I've felt, what I've known, and so I dubbed the Unforgiven lines, so maybe not, but personally, I still love it. Number 1, King Nothing is basically Enter Sandman all over again. The fourth and final single from the divisive load, King Nothing is probably one of the stronger tracks from its parent album. Tight, raspy, heavy, and the closest that Metallica ever got to recreating their fabled Black Album sound in the mid to late 90s, the song's attitude and more raw, focused sound definitely make it an overlooked standout. However, upon closer inspection, one of the primary reasons why King Nothing is one of the better entries in the band's load/reload era is probably its stark resemblance to another Metallica hit, namely Enter Sandman. Structurally, both these songs are virtually identical. Both begin with a slow building opening, King Nothing using Kirk Hammett's guitar, Lars Ulrich's cymbals, and Jason Newsted's bass, while Enter Sandman relies on James Hetfield's clean guitar, before descending into an electric guitar section that gradually adds notes to itself until after a percussive breakdown, it constructs the main riff. After a verse mostly built around power chords and a more middling pace, a short pre-chorus ensues that revolves around mid-neck guitar picking, followed by an anthemic sing-along refrain. The main riff is then recreated post-chorus, except for when it comes to the bridge, which goes out of its way to rebuild the riff gradually, much like in the intro. Wrap all of that up with a massive chorus, and you have two songs that are mathematically nigh on identical. The end of King Nothing even has a spoken word outro where Hetfield says "Off to Never Neverland," in reference to Enter Sandman. I mean, what more proof do you need? Whether an intentional reference or simply adherence to a formula that's been proven to work, there is no denying the immeasurable similarities between two of Metallica's biggest 90s hits. And that is my list. Let me know if there were any other really cool Metallica song details that hardly anybody else picked out. I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com, and I'll catch you soon.